Blood Quantum. It's the new zombie gore fest that appeared on Shudder months before originally was planned. And I would like to give you a general idea on if it's worth your time. Blood Quantum is set in a zombie plague that starts to take over the world in 1981. And when this happens, the Mi'kmaq tribe on the Red Crow Reservation, they discover that their indigenous inhabitants have a natural immunity to this virus. This will largely be a spoiler-free review, but we're going to touch a little bit on the structure. This film has a ton of action, but it does have like kind of that general slow buildup of the realization of the plague itself. Very comparable to the first season of Fear the Walking Dead, for those of you that are familiar with that. But it has a big transition to much deeper into the apocalypse. This is fun to see because you get to see a lot of the setup of the characters and how they react in the beginning versus how they are, much deeper into the timeline and what has changed, what's the same, and just how they ended up where they are. Which is fun to see because you do see a setup of the characters and what that translates to much farther down the line. So it does make a lot of sense to actually have that kind of separation of the time. The setting of the First Nations reservation serves for two factors as well. And for clarity's sake, First Nations generally refers to a lot of Native Americans on the Canadian side of the border, I would say. I may have that wrong. If I have any part of that wrong, I'm very sorry. But what's cool is this is not the standard community to focus on during a zombie film. But this helps and manage to harken the great Romero zombie trilogy of Day, Dawn, Night of the Living Dead, in allowing it to have more of a commentary on society and not just animated corpses. And social commentary can make some people groan, but from what I can gather, at least from my interpretation, this doesn't feel as preachy as those other works, really. Now, the title Blood Quantum is a direct reference to the practice of only acknowledging somebody as native by the percentage of indigenous blood they have. And that was enacted and used as a way to erode a culture over time. So using a blood quantum as a way to give you an immunity to the virus is actually kind of a fun twist to introduce people to the concept in a way that does tie into the story directly, and maybe introduce people to the concept who normally wouldn't come across that. You see the Red Crow Reservation community dynamic in a cool way. They adapt to the apocalypse pretty well. They're really used to troubling times, so they come to terms with it. Sure, this is weird, but all times are tough, So in that factor, the dynamics still play out the same. Father issues, substance abuse, relationships to elders, that all still comes into play. And everyone's individual different relationships to somebody who is not First Nations. People surviving the new wastelands want safe haven on their land now, the Red Crow land. And the Mi'kmaq people, they're very good, imperfect people. As frustrating as it can be, the Mi'kmaq don't want to be monsters, they're good people. Blood Quantum doesn't tell you how to think, but it gives you great insight on a complicated community. Okay, now to the fun part, the gore. This was not short on gore. It had some good practical effects and some unique gags all throughout. Some pretty good, pretty dark humor. The dialogue was well done except for maybe one exposition dump. It kind of felt that maybe the exposition setup was maybe left on the cutting room floor, but I don't have proof of that, so maybe it was just badly set up. And the characters were well unique on each other, from maybe their outlook on life to maybe something as simple as their preferred weapon of choice. You don't get confused on anybody, really. Sometimes this does lag in the acting department. It's only a few times and mainly in the beginning. I found it amusing because everybody seemed more comfortable and the world was burning around them. For instance, Michael Greyeyes, the actor who plays the main character Trailer, he's a little bit awkward in the first act. He does get by on some natural charisma, but then after that first act, he's perfectly great in it. Directing, editing, top notch. Give this guy, Michael Barnaby, I think his name, a bigger budget. Jeff Barnaby, sorry. There's some really cool floating Dutch angles in the intro that I really dug. And I spotted two fun little movie reference nods. They weren't too distracting, just fun. If you spot more, let me know. They're just little Easter eggs. They don't get in the way of anything. Some of Blood Quantum wasn't super hyper-focused, so it didn't have that super huge crescendo. Most movies will be super focused on one single point or something. So there is that part where it doesn't feel as focused. But did seem to go where it intended. If it was more focused, it probably would have come off as more preachy. And that's what I don't think they wanted out of this movie. This is a bleak film. Bad things happen. A lot. However, there's still fun and love and optimism and hope. yet manages to stay firmly in the same vein of the Romero films. It's not trying to be a Romero film per se, but it stands pretty well nicely beside them. So I'm going to give it 3 out of 4 stars, hearts, diamonds, whatever. 3 out of 4. So go check it out unless you are just too sick of the zombie genre, just period. But do check it out if you like a small pinch of some philosophical thought without being preachy in your horror, which is me. Be so kind to hit one of the buttons down below. Enjoy the fun intro. Peace out.